All right, this video is going to cover how to add in your foundation as well as make some section views and clean up some of those things with our section views. Right now, our model is pretty much complete, but there are some things that are going to need to get cleaned up. One piece I wanted to note before we get into all of that necessarily is some of our components may need to be shifted from when we went and adjusted our dimensions here. So you'll notice here with my kitchen, mine didn't get all too bad, but like now my countertop is kind of stuck in this wall, and it's also then not like flush up against this wall, and the same thing then with my cabinets. So one easy fix for that would be to use the Align tool, which is keyboard shortcut AL, or if you click on anything at all in your drawing, it'll pop up right here. And so I'm going to use AL, and then I'm going to click on the wall, and then I'll click on the back of that countertop, and it's just going to keep it flush with it. And I'll do the same thing with this countertop as well. The wall, and then that countertop. And then over on this side, the wall, and then the countertop edge, just to kind of keep them all flush with each other. Additionally, what we can do is if I hit escape 100 billion times, is we can also use like our arrow keys on our keyboard to just kind of like move things into place. When you zoom in, it shuffles it in like smaller increments than when like you're zoomed out. So if I go to do the washer zoomed out, it kind of moves in like big spaces versus if I zoom in, it moves it little by little by little. Again, with the washer and dryer, there's not really like a set space we want to put them in, but like things like our countertops, we kind of want those flush up against. Even though the stove doesn't necessarily go all the way up against the wall, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it to be pretty centered here, which that seems pretty good. And I'll hit escape a couple times. I'm going to move this countertop and like this base cabinet to just be a little wider too. I probably shouldn't put it right up against it now, thinking back to what I just did to center it. So let's click on it and shift it a little bit more this way. That seems pretty good. That seems good to me. So once I've got all of my dimensions and everything placed, the first thing I'm going to do before I make my section is I'm going to start my foundation. Now, in order to add in a level for the foundation, we need to be in an elevation style view or a section style view. We need to be in a view that shows a vertical view of the building. We don't have any sections placed yet, so we can't go into one of those. To go into one of our elevations, the two ways to get there at the moment would be either to click on any of these arrowheads for our elevation views. So if I double clicked on these like this arrowhead, it's going to take me into that west elevation. Or I could also come here in my project browser, and if I go to my elevations, I could double click. And it doesn't really matter which elevation view you're in, you just want to be in one of those elevation views. And then to add a level, the keyboard shortcut is either LL, or in the architecture tab, we have this button right here for adding a level. So you'll either click on this button or use the keyboard shortcut LL. What I want to make sure it's doing, which it doesn't seem mine is set that way, I'm not sure why, yours might have this checked off, is we wanted to create a floor plan view for us while we add it in. So I'm going to make sure that create view is checked off. And then I'm going to click just somewhere aligned with this side, with the left side of my level heads. Doesn't really matter where or how far down. So I'm going to click once, and then I'm going to shoot it all the way across until it's aligned up here. So I'm seeing that dashed line. Now by default, it called it level 3. I don't like that. So I'm just going to click on level 3, and I'm going to rename mine foundation because that makes more sense. It's going to ask if I want to rename the corresponding view. So I'll say sure. And we'll also see that over here in our floor plans, it's now made a level called foundation. I'm also going to redo this number from -10. It's not going to matter too much in this project. I'm going to say like -4 feet is how far down I'll put my foundation. And now we have a foundation view. So I'm going to hit escape a billion trillion times. To go into that foundation view, I either can double click on it in my project browser, or I can even double click on this spot elevation and it'll show me my foundation view. So a couple of things that we want to adjust within our foundation is we are going to, again, hide our CAD. So I'm going to click on that CAD, right click, hide in view category to make it go away. And you'll also see that it's showing me a lot more than I necessarily want to see in this view. In some ways, that's going to be a little helpful because it'll give us something to trace around for our foundation. And then we're going to adjust some of our visibility for it. Now, if nothing is like showing up in yours, it could be, let me go back into one of my elevations, the number you have this set at. So if I have this set at negative 10 feet, if I set it back down there, when I go into my foundation, which I can either get to here, here, or here, nothing's in this view at all. And nothing's in this view because I have my foundation set so far down. So what I could do, or I have it set at negative 10 feet, and because my floor plan cut is at 4 feet above that, nothing is showing up, and that's why nothing's showing up here. So if I wanted to keep it at negative 10 feet, which let's do it for this project, why not? Or if yours is at negative 4, you can keep it there. Is I'm going to adjust my visual settings. And so I'm going to put a base range underlay of, I'm going to say, can you show me level 1? And then just move kind of out of here. This is just going to give me something to trace around when I go to put foundation walls in here. And so I'm going to start my wall tool for my foundation, which is going to be either just WA or wall right here. And I'm going to make my foundation walls out of this generic 8-inch masonry, because this is essentially a CMU here is what we're looking at. Now, a couple of other settings I'm going to play around with in here is my location line. Last time we drew based off the center that we were tracing around. This time I'm going to say that I want to do it based on a core face interior. I could be wrong about that. We'll see in a moment. And for my base constraint, I want it to start at my foundation level, and my top constraint, I want it to go up to level 1. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just trace around, which let me hit escape once, because I want it to go to the core face, which I don't know if it's lining up there. I guess we'll find out. I'm just going to trace around to keep it flush with my sides. And it's warning me that my walls overlap. There we go. Now I see that interior. Whoops. Let me hit escape. For some reason, it's not showing me that. What if I do look up for my underlay? There we go. If I change my underlay to look up, now I can see that core face that I want to trace around with. And don't worry about that warning that it's popping up there for us. It's just saying that the floor and the walls are kind of glitching or interacting with each other. So if you have that wall here, unfortunately, go ahead and just click on it and delete it. Make sure in your settings here for your floor plan, you've got it set to level 1 and then an orientation of lookup, because we want to kind of keep it flush with this part of our wall right here. I'm going to start the wall tool again, and I'm going to put it on that core face interior. You could also do core face exterior, and then you'll just trace around in this way. We've got our base constraint of level foundation, our top constraint up to level 1. We'll click on that corner to start. I'm going to go over to this corner. It's going to yell at me. I'm going to go again. So I'm just going to trace around my whole building. Which sometimes we do have to stop the tool and start it again on some of these corners to make sure it actually is sitting flush. So I'm just hitting escape once. And these warnings are just letting me know things overlap. We're going to fix that in a minute. Click on that corner to this corner, this corner to this one. I'm also going to hit escape a couple of times. I'm going to extend this foundation wall out. So I'm just going to click on that grip and just pull it. Just because, and let me click on this one and pull it to intersect as well. The way I think this foundation would be laid out and the way I think kind of the building would get framed would be kind of this part of the building and this part. So I'm going to make a little choice there. Once I've traced around my foundation, I can turn that underlay off. So I'm going to scroll down in here and I'm going to set my underlay back to none. And if I go look at it in 3D, I've got my section box on, so only a little part of it is actually being shown. But if I pull that down, we can now see that we have a foundation. What it was warning me about is the fact that kind of these walls here are overlapping with these foundation walls as well. So what we want to do is just give a little bit of a top offset for that top constraint. So I can do this in the floor plan or I could do it in the 3D view. I'm just going to go back into my foundation floor plan. I'm going to highlight all of these walls and I'm going to give them a top offset of -10 inches. And then I'll just kind of move my cursor out to apply it. If we go look at it in 3D, what it's doing now is essentially having the foundation just sit right underneath like where our floor. We could have applied it beforehand, but sometimes it's like, oh, do we know if that's going to be there or not? Sometimes these warnings will pop up. We kind of can do things in any sort of order or reason when we're working in Revit. And that's one of the many reasons why I really like this software. It does take some getting used to. Additionally, like one cool thing about using the top offsets and the bottom offsets is I'm just going to go into one of my elevation views. If I did like some research around and realized that my foundation's way too deep and I actually only need like a 4-foot deep foundation or a 6-foot deep foundation, if I change that number to -6 foot, the floor or the foundation wall is going to change along with it. Since this is just kind of an imaginary building, we don't really have a foundation depth that we need, but we can kind of change or alter that around. I'm going to go back into my 3D view so I can add a footing to all of these walls. So to add my footing in, I'm going to sort of orbit around to look underneath it. So I'm holding shift in the scroll wheel to orbit my building around and just kind of look underneath. And then I'm going to use the footing tool. So the footing tool is keyboard shortcut FT, or in the structure tab, it is this button here. I know it says wall, but it's actually the footing. By default, it's giving me a 3-foot wide by 1 foot deep footing. I'm going to change it to just be 2 feet wide. So I'm going to go into edit type. I'm going to duplicate it because we should always duplicate before we make a change, unlike what I did with the floors in a previous video. And then I'm going to just change its width to 2 foot. Okay. And then to apply it, we're just going to click on each wall we want to put a footing on. And then I've just applied a footing to all of them. Now, if I go into my foundation view, there's a couple of things that are showing up in here from just where I moved my walls to up to 6 feet instead of -10 feet. So there's something showing up in here. Why they're showing up, I'm not sure, but there's a couple of ways we could go fix it. The way I would recommend fixing it is also the same way that we're going to get our footing to appear in this view. So I'm going to hit escape about 1 billion trillion times. And I'm going to go scroll down in my properties bar, past the underlay until I see the extents, and I'm going to edit my view range in these extents. So I'm going to click on edit. For my top, instead of it being at 7'6", I'm going to say the top of my wall is at 6 feet. And my cut plane, I'm going to put at 2 feet. I'm going to hit apply to see what happens. And you'll see that kind of got rid of all of those pieces like the windows and the cabinets and closets, they went away. To get our footing to appear, we're going to put our bottom at around like -1 foot. Let's try. Before we hit apply, we also need to change this depth. These two numbers have to match. And now I'll see too that my footing appeared in here. So that's great. I'm going to click OK. Then the next thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to create some section cuts. We're going to make 2 section cuts. I find the best way to make a section cut is to do it from a floor plan style view. So in my floor plan view, back in level 1, you can either click here or you could click here. There's no real rhyme or reason for how we get into it, or no correct way to get into it. The 2 ways you can create a section cut is you can either use the shortcut button here, or you can go into your view tab and there's a button here for it. So I'm just going to use the shortcut option. When we go to make a building section, you're essentially going to say, where do you want that cut to start and where do you want it to end? So we're going to make 2 clicks to just make a line to slice the building open. If you don't place it in the perfect spot, that's fine because you can change it after the fact. So I'm just going to click over here to start and then click over here to end it. And it's made a section cut through my whole building. I want it to go through that door. I'll try to center it through that door as well. So I'm just going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard to kind of shuffle it through. I have it facing this direction towards the bedrooms. If I wanted to flip it, I can just use that to flip which way it's going. The other thing you want to pay attention to within these views is its view range. So sometimes students will say that it's not like pieces are like missing or disappearing in it. And that's because if I wanted this back door to show, I need to make sure that this box is going through it. So if your view range is only going to be tiny like that, we're just going to drag it out to be here. And the other thing I like to do with my section cuts is to cut them. So I'm going to just put a gap or a break in between the section line and just drag it out. So that way it's not going all the way through the building and kind of busying up our line work. Now to go look at this section we created, we can either double click on the section head, or what it's done is in our project browser, it's made a new little area called sections, and we can double click and open up section 1. So when I'm looking at this building section, there's a couple of things that I want to clean up first. So I want to make kind of everything for my overall building just like one connected piece. If I had a solid fill in there, I want it to just to be like all one connected bubble of it. So to do that, we're going to use the align tool as well as the join geometry tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of align these walls with the ceilings that I've placed. So I'm going to use align, which is keyboard shortcut AL, or you can click on literally anything, and then it's this button here. And I'm going to say I want the ceiling and the top of this wall to sit flush. I want the ceiling and the bottom of this wall to sit flush. Ceiling and this wall, ceiling and this wall, ceiling and this wall. And that seems good for our align tool. There's also real quickly that I noticed, so let me hit escape a couple of times. This closet shelf is kind of awkwardly sticking in there, so I'm just going to use my arrow keys to bump that shelf out. This bathtub is also kind of stuck in the wall, and that's just from when I moved and adjusted parts of my building around, so that some pieces just kind of got like awkwardly stuck. The next thing I'm going to do is join all of these geometry together in my building. So to get to the join geometry tool, it doesn't have a keyboard shortcut, but again, if you click on anything at all, it opens up this modify bar, and it is this button here. I would recommend setting a keyboard shortcut for join geometry because we use it so often. So to set a keyboard shortcut, you'll hit escape 100 billion times, and you'll use the keyboard shortcut KS to open up your keyboard shortcuts. And then if you type join up here, join geometry, and then you'll see I've already applied a keyboard shortcut to it of JG. So you can just come down here and then click assign for it. But the way the join geometry tool works is if you click on it here, you'll see that icon pop up next to it. Or if I hit escape a bunch of times and use JG, you'll see it also pops up. And you're going to click on the two pieces you want to join. So I clicked on my roof and then I clicked on my wall, and you'll see that it kind of just joined the two of them together. I'll click on the roof and it joins them together. The roof and this wall, the ceiling and this wall, the ceiling and this wall, the ceiling and this wall. So I'm just going to go through and join all of it together until it can all be kind of like one piece. Essentially, if I use the hatch tool in AutoCAD, would it just fill this whole thing in? So I'm going to join the wall to the floor, the foundation to the floor, the foundation to its footing, foundation to its footing, foundation to the floor. So I'm just clicking to add everything together. The floor to this wall, the floor to this wall, the footing to the foundation to the floor to the wall. I want it all to be one piece. So it's just a lot of clicking until it's all one connected piece going around. Then I'm going to hit escape a billion trillion times. One thing you'll notice is our CAD drawing is still kind of showing up in here. And so we need to turn its visibility off for it. So again, that's keyboard shortcut VG. And then we'll go into imported, and I'm just going to uncheck the CAD drawing just to hide it. And then we're also going to want to adjust our detail level for something like a section cut. So I'm going to change my detail level to fine, and you'll see then that it'll show things like our subflooring and how everything's getting like built together and attached together for it. So let's make one more section view as well, just to get like some practice in with our sections. So I'm going to go into my level 1 floor plan, and I'll do a section cutting through the building this way. So I'm going to use my section tool up here. I'm going to click where I want it to start, click where I want it to end. If I want it facing the other way, I can use these arrow keys to flip it around. Excuse me. And if I also wanted to move these section heads up or down, I can move them. I can break that section apart and just pull it out. Excuse me again. And then if I want to go into this section view to look at it and clean it up if it needs any cleaning, I'm actually going to use my arrowheads just to shuffle it over a little bit. I want it going through that door a little better. And then to go into this view, I could double click on the section head, or I can go into my browser and I can open up section 2. So a few things that need to get cleaned up in here, just like with our other one, is we're going to do some align for our walls so they sit flush with where our ceiling sits. So I'm going to use AL. Sure, I'll save my project. I'm going to click on the ceiling and then the top of this wall, ceiling, top of this wall hanging out behind it, ceiling, and then the top of this wall, ceiling, and the top of this wall. And then I'll use my join geometry tool to bring all the pieces together. One thing is if you have thin lines currently turned on, which again is TL, then that hides line weights, but it also makes the joining geometry a little bit harder. So TL is thin lines, or this tool here. You're going to want to make sure you have line weights visible. It just makes it easier. Our CAD drawing is also still kind of visible or present. So let's go into VG and then imported categories just to turn it off. Really, I guess we could delete it at this point, but I just don't want to delete it just yet. I always prefer to have it there just in case I might need it. Then I'm going to start join geometry, which again is in the modify tool tab, and then this button or keyboard shortcut JG that we just made. I'm going to do my footing to my foundation to my floor to my wall, my wall to my ceiling, my wall to my roof. Footing to foundation, foundation to floor, floor to wall, wall to ceiling, wall to roof, and then we also have the ceiling to this wall to this ceiling. Floor to wall, though we're not really going to see it much purely just because of the fact that there is that door. So like we won't see that connection the way we typically would where we have a wall going through. Sort of like with this one, though I don't think I did join those together. Boop, 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 boop. Did I? Looks like maybe I joined something weird. Let's try unjoining geometry in this part. And then let's try joining geometry again. I think it's just because of the way I did my floor is why that one's coming out that way. There we go. Now it seems that one went away. Just gonna Control Z and I'm just gonna leave that be. Just gonna leave it be. I unjoined stuff up here. I just made a bigger mess than I needed to make. Let me go back into section 2, but this one, because there's that door there, it's not going to show up the way we typically would see it. Let's up our detail level, so that's this button here to fine. And now we've got some building sections made, as well as our foundation. In our next video is also going to be our last video. We're going to go over rendering and then setting up these views and viewports in our paper space or our sheets.